Aloha and welcome to this extra special Mermaid virtual art party. I'm Sheep of Art by Sheep, and for the past 5 years I have been a Partisita or party artist at Island Art Party here on the beautiful island of Maui. Today we'll be doing an original debut of mine called Splash. So get those painting stations ready, grab your favorite furry or fin pal, and let's go ahead and get this party started. Art by Sheep. Today, Eva, my favorite furry fish friend, will be helping me demonstrate what a proper painting station should look like. To paint Splash today, you will need the following supplies: canvas or canvas board, practice paper, a stable cup like a mason jar for water, a big stack of napkins or paper towels, a palette for paint, a large flat brush, a medium and a small round brush for detailing. An easel and an apron and a drop cloth come in handy, as acrylic paint can be messy and become a permanent part of your decor. And of course, you'll be needing acrylic paint in the following colors: white, black, phthalo or dark green, cobalt or light blue, deep yellow, dark brown or umber, and red. You may also want to consider using pink or purple for additional mertastic colors in your coral reef. The last thing you'll be needing is a Sharpie to sign your masterpiece, although you can always use paint. Now that our painting station is all set up, let's get this party started. Let's grab our large-sized flat brush. And you want to make sure it's damp. So dip it in your cup of water. I like to use the old pickle jar. Rinse it out, squeeze it through your paper towel. The best way to get that water out is to make a taco with your paper towel. Kind of pinch at the base, squeeze, and pull your brush through. Now we need to mix a pretty big pile of paint because this is going to fill in our whole background. Depending on what you're painting on today, you might want to add more scoops or less scoops. And this color doesn't have to be perfect right away. We're going to kind of play with it. So grab your big brush and use your brush kind of like a shovel. So you're going to dip your brush with the side of it into the pile of paint. Let's start with 2 scoops of blue. 1, 2. Now you don't need to rinse your brush. Let's dip immediately into 2 large scoops of green. 2 large scoops of green. And I'm going to grab 3 scoops of white. 2 and 3. Hopefully you keep your paints near you. It's better to just put a little bit on your palette and then just add so you don't waste paint. So we're going to mix these colors together. So the best way to do so is to take your brush and kind of push along the outside edges of your pile of paint and just swirl your brush until it's mostly mixed. Now we don't have to overly mix it. Just get it so it's kind of streaky. So this is going to be a nice teal color. Now you can really play with this color. Of course the background could be any version of ocean color you like. So add a little bit more blue if you want. You can add a little bit more green. I'm going to actually add maybe a little bit more white. I find if the background is lighter, then you can see your mermaid better. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mix this. All right, so that's mostly mixed. So let's go ahead and start filling in our background. So the idea here is that this whole background is kind of like looking through a fisheye lens, meaning it's kind of curved upwards. So from your top middle of your canvas, let's drop down a couple inches and place a dot. And then we're going to connect from the sides and make a big smiley face. And this doesn't matter too much. This is to get the shape right. And now we're going to basically fill in the whole thing. So let's start by filling in our smiley face. Now the key to doing this is to use long brush strokes. Long brush strokes. And you're going to just keep curving your brush up and down as you fill it in. If you're getting a lot of white marks, especially along the edges of your canvas as you go along, you can always start with the edges like this. You could paint all the way to the sides too. So you want to just paint the edges, and then you could also fill in the whole thing with that smiley faced shape. Then you'll get rid of any white streaks along the edges. But there's no wrong way really to fill in this background. Even if you just filled in the whole thing with kind of like streaks or however you wanted, you could go over it in the end and just add this kind of shape and texture to it. So just play. I like to kind of keep a smooth background on this one because our coral is going to be really rough and our mermaid, and so that'll help those other elements stand out. All right, looks like we've set the stage here to our painting, so let's go ahead and fill in the rest of it. Now keep your brush damp. Every few brush strokes, just rinse it out in your cup of water, squeeze it through your paper towel. If your paintbrush isn't just easily gliding across the canvas, then you know your brush is too dry. So that paint should just go on there really easy, and don't be afraid to kind of use a lot. Also at this part, we're going to be doing some blending here in just a minute. So to make that paint blend properly, you're going to want to use a lot of paint. Just a lot of paint. This paint dries very fast, which is why it's so fun to use. So don't be afraid to make a mistake, because you'll always be able to let it dry, and then you'll be able to fix it once it's dry. Okay. Almost there. Now, the more fun you have with painting, the better it's going to turn out. So make sure you're playing some good music. Pause when you need to. Get up and dance a little bit. It's just going to make it that much more fun. Painting should not be stressful. It should be fun. Because just know you can always paint the same painting again, and you'll get better at it every time. Okay, so we have a nice mermaid kind of teal background here. So let's rinse out our brush. It's okay if there's still some teal paint in it. More the point here is to make sure your brush is damp. Again, you don't want it to be dripping wet. And you're going to dip into blue, just straight up blue, the dark blue. And we want to keep the top a little lighter, so let's focus towards the bottom here. I'm just going to add a few random streaks of various lengths throughout this canvas here. So throw some short ones in, throw some long ones in, and then we want that blue paint to still show up, so just blend over the top like 2 or 3 times. So it's still nice and bright. Now I'm going to move pretty fast here throughout this painting, but don't let that be pressure to you. Please, please, please take your time. It's all about taking your time and enjoying the process. And speed is something you'll get if you keep taking my videos. Eventually you'll be faster than I am. Okay, so I've got blue in there. Now I'm going to add a little bit of green. Now, also, you can add in both of these colors, but no, you don't have to. If you're in love with your background color, you maybe don't want to add a lot more green in there. If it already feels really green, same thing goes with blue. But if it's kind of this nice middle teal color and you can make it a little darker, it's nice to add these colors in because they'll give your water the appearance of getting deeper. All right, so you can bounce back and forth a little bit here. I might add in a little bit more blue and kind of play with these colors. It's also important to not overdo it. If you think you're done, the best thing you can do is take a couple of steps back. All right, looks good. If it doesn't, then you'll know. Just keep taking steps back and do that throughout the painting. Okay, so let's add these nice little ripples at the top. I'm talking about this right here. I'm going to use my big brush. And this time, let's do a little cheat technique called double loading. That's where you're going to get 2 colors on your brush at the same time. Now, if you're out of white or your white looks a little muddy, you can just add a little bit more to your plate. And by muddy, I mean you have other colors in it. We want some fresh white and some fresh blue. So I've rinsed my brush and I've squeezed it through my paper towel. And I'm going to double load into both of these colors. So let's get blue on one side of the brush and white on the other. As you reload with these colors, it's not specific to a side. You're just going to kind of get both colors on your brush. All right, and let's start by re-outlining that smiley face we started out with. It doesn't have to match because you probably can't see it anyway. Just get a nice smiley face in there that at least dips a couple inches below your canvas. All right, and now we are going to play with tapping and squiggling. So the squiggle, you're gonna move your brush up and down as you move back and forth, except we're gonna keep working on this kind of fisheye perspective or smiley face. So you're gonna take your brush and do this. And then the tapping is just that, tapping. And you'll tap little clumps of colors in that same sort of smiley face motion. Okay, so now that you've been sitting there for a minute with these colors on your brush, let's go ahead and paint. So you could start with either motion. Let's start with the squiggling. So I'm just gonna get some nice coverage up here. I'm just pressing my brush and squiggling. I also want to squiggle on top of the smiley face line a little bit. I don't really want a harsh line there, although we are going to kind of get rid of a lot of that. So that was just to get how far down we want to go. So we could always dip below it a little bit so we can kind of make that outline nice and squiggly. And I don't want to over blend. I just want to get some nice coverage in there. All right, now let's keep with those same two colors and play with some tapping. And let's just focus on tapping our smiley face shapes, tap, 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 in between our squiggles. Tap, 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 tap. And we're not doing dots. We're not jumping around doing dots. Think like you're giving your water some birthmarks here, almost like painting clouds. If your colors start blending together too much, what I encourage you to do is maybe just dip into white or blue on its own, because you'll still have a lot of the other color in your brush, and then play with that. We don't want to overdo it here because then we're going to lose our squiggles. Then we're just going to get this muddy, ripply area on top, and it's not going to look like water. I'm going to rinse out my white here, switch to blue. So we're going for water. So if you overpaint, don't be like, oh, I have to throw out my canvas, I ruined it. I promise that you didn't. You just need to let it dry, and then you could just start again with the tapping and the squiggle. Okay, let's take a step back. Looks pretty good. Pretty good. See, that's where you get into one brush stroke too far. I talk about that a lot, where you overpaint it. You're like, it's good, but maybe just one more thing. Allow yourself to stop, because we're gonna do a little bit more layering on here in just a minute. Okay, the next thing we do is our streaks. Like light is poking through the surface. That is this background stuff right here. This isn't that tricky. I don't want you to overthink it, but I would recommend maybe practicing on your paper, and then without adding more paint on your brush, you can try it on your canvas, and we'll go more into that later. Now, if you get it in there and you don't love the streaks, just know that you can paint over it again with this teal background and just start again after it's dry, after your mistake is dry. But also, what isn't in the example are bubbles. I'm going to show you guys how to add bubbles too today. So you can also do bubbles. So let's rinse out our big brush, squeeze it through a paper towel. Now, something I tell you all the time to do is to keep those brushes nice and tight. But what we want to do instead is to take our brush, take your finger and flick it like this. Do you see that? You want the bristles kind of separated. All right? So we're going to dip into white with these separated bristles, but the least amount of white you have on your brush, the better. So, damp brush, very little white. Scrape it out into your paper towel. And we're going to pull in kind of a V shape. So stamp at the very bottom of your squiggles. I'm going to kind of step in front of the camera this time, or the canvas, and stamp, and I'm going to pull straight down. I'm pulling very lightly, very lightly. Dip into white, scrape it off your brush. We don't want single strokes. We want to start creating some overlap, and we're going to kind of fan it out. And these streaks can come down. Some could be shorter. Let's add a little bit more white. Some can be longer. The bottom is going to get kind of covered up, so it doesn't really matter. And at this point, it's going to kind of mess up this top area here with the squiggles. We'll fix it in just a sec. So don't paint over the top. You could go over it again, but just press very, very, very lightly. And again, if you think you messed it up, what you can do is rinse out your brush and just paint with water. So dip it into water, kind of wipe it out without more paint on your brush. If you move fast, you can just paint over the top of your streaks if you think they're too bold, and that will kind of take that paint and spread it out. So you don't have to look at it anymore. Okay, that's probably enough streaks. We don't want to get too crazy with this. So rinse out your brush again. Let's take that double load of white and blue. So white on one side, blue on the other. And let's just re-squiggle and tap a little bit over the top of these light rays. And anywhere else you think you need, because it's probably pretty dry at this point. Tap, tap, tap. We want it to look like those light rays are light, is light breaking through the surface, not that we have lines laying on top of our squiggles. This is meant to be the top of our water, if you weren't catching that. Okay. Can you believe it? We're already done with our big brush. That's it. We're just going to use it for this background stuff. So let's go ahead and rinse out our big brush. And if you want a brush tutorial on how to care for your brushes, that's going to be coming up here really soon. So make sure you check out my video on how to wash your brushes. It should be available a week after I post this video. Okay, so we're going to move to our round brush. There's a couple of different coral shapes, actually three sorts of C shapes, coral, one's grass, that we can do. Let's grab our practice paper, and we're going to talk about those three shapes. I'm going to take a risk here and put this on my wet canvas. Okay, so we're going to grab that medium-sized round brush. Now you want to make sure it's kind of fluffy again, kind of like you did with the streaks. So take your brush, fluff it out, and we'll be using black, and it's okay if your background's still wet. You actually kind of want that, and I'll talk about why in a minute. So dip into black, and first you're going to make kind of these towery shapes along the bottom. And this could be any sort of thing. We're going to do 2 layers of these. For now, just practice, because there is a specific order we're going to do this in. We're going to do a couple layers, but I just want you to see what this looks like. All right, so it's tapping. So it's all about randomness. If I just tapped in like the same shape over and over again, it wouldn't be that great. So I really want to just tap in some clumps of color that maybe go up and down. Maybe you could Google a picture of like coral reef shapes, get some inspiration, because there's so many different types. Although I'm kind of working in towers and clumps. So that's shape 1, and that's with the fluffy round brush. Shape number 2, let's rinse out our brush. Spin it through your paper towel. We want it to have a nice pointed tip for coral shape number 2 and for our little kind of leafy shapes here. Okay, so we're going to make this branch coral. So this is not too different than doing branches of a tree. You're going to stamp kind of hard and then make a few big curvy lines that pull from a dot. So I should have started with the dot. Let's pull 1, 2, 3 curvy lines to start. Make them all different heights, curving any sort of way. Now, wherever the branch coral connects to the previous branch, it'll be thicker, and towards the tip, it should be a little skinnier. So as I do this, I'm stamping hard and then kind of releasing my pressure. All right, and now I want to make a couple of shapes off of these lines. Same thing, stamp hard, release. Stamp hard, release. The key to making this coral look awesome, other than this playing with pressure, stamp, release, is to make sure that the tips of your coral are all on different planes. So if you look here, if I hold up my brush, every single piece of coral is pretty much on a different plane. And if it's not, you can just extend it a little bit. All right, so let's do a couple more of these shapes, stamp and release. They can be doing anything you want. And then just pick a couple of those shapes you just painted, do a couple more. Stamp, release, voila. Branch coral. Okay, so the last shape we're gonna do is kind of this grassy stuff. It's pretty much like your branch coral. So, nice pointed brush, dip into whatever practice color you like, do a dot, and you're gonna stamp and pull and release, and you're gonna keep pulling from that dot, and you're just gonna add some long grassy shapes. It's okay if some of these are the same height. Make sure you add a few littler ones. Usually I make about like 3 to 5 shapes in each grassy shape. And it's nice if they pull from different directions. So if I do one pointing this way, maybe the next time I have another one pointed this way. Okay. Go ahead and move your practice paper. Now, if your background is still wet, that's a really good thing because we want these shapes to kind of mix with that background color so that they're nice and soft and so they look like they're underwater. So let's grab our round brush. Now, if your background feels really dry already, and you'll know if it looks shiny, it's still a little bit wet. But if it seems dry, you can also double load with a pointed round brush, your medium round brush. Dip into your teal mix that we use for our background and dip into black on the other side. So you have teal and black, okay? And we're gonna do some background shapes. So we wanna do around like 4 or so, 4 to 5. And let's make these no more, we want them different heights, remember, but let's not make them any more than like 4 inches high. If you're working on the same size canvas as me, I'm working on a 16 by 20. Okay, so I've got black and teal, and I'm gonna start tapping some tower shapes. And those colors will kind of blend together. It should make it look kind of soft. If it still looks really bold, black, you don't need a whole lot of it on your brush, so you can always soften it by using more teal or add a little bit of black at times if it's too light still. These are just our background coral reef shapes. Okay. Tap, tap, tap. Now, I'm not really going all the way to the bottom with this one. We will be adding some darker shapes in the front to make it look like, we have some layers of coral in our background. Oops, got a little dark. So you can bring this about like a 1/2 inch or so to the bottom. Tap, tap, tap. Make sure you're playing with some different shapes. You kind of just fill in a big blocky shape like this. It's all about creating a bunch of different images, different shapes, different sizes. Will just make it look that much more visually interesting when you're done. Okay. So that's layer 1 of coral. Maybe take a step back, see if you want to make anything a little taller. If you went a little high with it, your mermaid is diving into the reef, that's okay too. Maybe she found a seashell she wants. Okay, so we've got that filled in. Let me fill it in a little deeper down here. Okay, now let's rinse out our brush because it's probably getting a little dry. Wipe it through your paper towel, flick it. Let's dip into straight up black. And every time I load into color, I kind of dip my brush. I like to tap it out a couple of times before I start. Now let's add maybe like 4 or so shapes about halfway down and lower into our previous coral shape. These don't have to come all the way across. Like the first row, if you notice, I kind of went all the way across. I could jump up here and there. These could be less towery, more moundy, make a couple towers. Even if you come like this and make a shape go in front or above your previous coral, that's okay too. It'll still give that kind of 3D look. Every time you dip into your paint, make sure you rinse it out. Oops, I grabbed some white. That's okay. You can always fix it. It's okay if there's lots of color in here. We're gonna add actual colors on top of this too, a little bit later. But if we added them in right now while that paint's wet, the black will take over. You're not gonna be able to see it. So we'll add that in after a break. Okay. Okay, if you have some darker spots or some more gray spots, having a lot of different colors will just make it, well, much more colorful. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look here. So if there's some shapes you really don't like, that's the spot you're going to want to add the next shape. You can cover up things you don't like still. So let's add in some of our branch coral. So I'm going to rinse out my brush and spin it through my paper towel. Make sure it's nice and pointy. You can even take your finger like this. Make sure it's nice and pointed. And we're going to dip into black. And let's add like 2 or 3 of these shapes. So they could be coming from the bottom of your canvas like this. Let's do a big one. So let's go over that shape again. Dot, stamp and pull out. Like 3 curvy lines. It's okay if they drag some teal with them. We're going to add the color on later and make it darker. Although I do like to keep these shapes a little darker than my background coral. Alright, now stamp and release your pressure. Let's add 1 to 2 lines at each side of our bigger line. And then just pick a couple random branches, different sides, and let's add some tiny branches. Perfect. So that was a big one. Know that you could also like add a little one in the distance. I am pressing as lightly as I possibly can. So learning how to use the pressure of your brush is going to be so helpful to just play with pressure. Because it's so easy, especially if you're kind of nervous for the first time and you don't want to mess it up. You start holding your breath and grinding your teeth and painting really hard. If you notice you're doing that, did I call you out? Stop, relax, put a smile on your face, and just press lightly. Pretend like you're tickling your canvas. It should feel good, and you shouldn't, your hands shouldn't be cramped up by the time you're done. Okay, so we did 3 shapes. That's probably fine. Let's rinse out our brush. Stamp it and spin it through a paper towel. And let's dip into black again with our pointed brush. And let's just add 2 to 3 of these long grassy shapes. And I like to point one coming this way and one pointing this way. They can be coming from the bottom of your canvas or on top of any sort of coral shape. Press extra light for these. If you get any line that's too fat, the best thing you can do is be patient, let it dry. You don't have to fix it right away. Let it dry, and then you can paint over it with your teal color or add a different shape like coral over the top. All right, I'm going to make them kind of different heights here. Let's make one coming from this bottom right corner. And you know, even my line here, it gets fat, it's a little skinny, it's kind of fat again. It's okay. It doesn't have to be just like perfect all the way across. All right, that's quite a bit of shapes. Now, know you're going to be adding other colors on top of your coral. You're going to be adding fish. You're going to be adding bubbles because we decided to today. So it's okay to know when to stop because it shouldn't look perfect right now. We're going to add a lot more on the top. But can you believe it? We are already more than halfway done with our painting. So it's really important to let these paintings dry before adding any additional colors or elements. So take this moment to refill your favorite bubbly drink of choice, and let's let our backgrounds dry so we can get to the best part of the painting, our mermaid. Enjoy your break. We'll get started again in just a second.
What's the big deal, Susan? Why do I gotta wait for my paint to dry?
Because, Gary, the mermaid will never work out if you don't let the paint dry. It's over. I have to go.
Aloha, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed a little break, got up and got to do a little dancing, maybe poured yourself another beverage. And now we're ready to get to the best part, painting our mermaid. Now you notice something funny has happened since the break. My painting is now upside down. That's because I find it's easier to paint the mermaid right side up. So I'll flip my canvas later, but this is a diving painting, right? She could be coming up towards the water too. That's up to you. Won't make any difference. So we're going to be using our round brush to get started. It's really, really important that your round brush has a nice pointed tip. So rinse it and spin it through your paper towel. Make sure it looks nice and sharp throughout this painting. And we're going to press really lightly. Now, as I give you these steps, you really want to start with your mermaid and your dots to be really small because they're going to grow as you progress. And if you keep playing with the shape of that mermaid and you start really big and keep fixing it, your mermaid might be giant, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I would just recommend starting small and then building your mermaid to the desired voluptuousness. Okay, let's start with the dot in the very center of our canvas. And from that dot, we're going to stamp and pull maybe like an inch, inch and a half line. So it's the center of our canvas, roughly. Her fin might go into the water later on. I kind of like that effect because we can tap some more of these ripples over the top. It look like the tips of her fin are peeking out, like in the surface. Okay, so we got our line. Now let's jet down from that line and we're going to go down. Let's see about like 4 or 5 inches. So just short of your ripples. Let's say another way of saying that if you're in the center of your canvas, maybe like an inch away from your ripples. So from the middle line all the way down. And we're going to connect from the sides of our line to that center dot. So let's start with the right side. Stamp. You're going to kind of curve out and then in. We're going to want the tip to be kind of a point. And now go out and in to point. And now we can play with it. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if there's more booty, shall we say, to one side. Because maybe she's kind of turned a little bit. Okay, and we want to make sure that tip of her tail is nice and pointy. And we're going to fill it in. We're going to do this because we want her tail to look really bright. If you paint with that green on its own on the background, it's going to be kind of see-through. It's just not going to look right. But I'm not going to do the fin right now. This is just the tail part. The fin will come later. We want the fin to look see-through because, you know, usually with the fins on a fish, it's they're kind of see-through. Okay. Now let's go ahead and mix our skin color of choice. I'm going to take 2 scoops of white with my round brush. I didn't rinse my brush because we were just painting with white. Like a dip of brown and a tiny, tiny dip of red. And let's see where that gets us. Now you could play with pink. With mermaids, I've seen people do purple skin. You know, it doesn't have to be realistic. White, black, yellow, any color will look beautiful on your mermaid. I'm going to add maybe a tiny bit more red. That'll give it kind of a nice pinkish tone. Okay. Perfect. Now, I'm going to rinse out my brush. I'll show you guys what I got here, but I change it all the time. Just make sure you either have black or white in your mixture. That'll help it not look see-through. Okay, so this is the color I got. And we'll be changing it a little bit too. Okay, so if you're only good at stick figures, this is the painting for you. Let's go from the middle of our tail and let's shoot up like 3 or 4 inches and place a dot. I guess that's more like 3. And stamp and pull and connect to the top of your tail. Now you're going to stamp and make a capital T. And you want the T part to be about as wide as the waist. And don't worry about this so much. You're not really going to see this. This is just to get her dimensions right. Okay, now let's stamp and curve in to each side and connect to the sides of the tail. You can put more hair if any part of this gets really funky. You can pull more hair later on and cover up little things you don't like. But make sure you're nice to yourself. Sometimes you mess up things that don't need to be, or you mess with things that don't need to be messed with, and it might be fine. Okay, let's pull up maybe a 1/2 inch. We're gonna give her a little line for her neck. I'm not gonna focus on that because you're not gonna see it. And then you're gonna stamp and pull. Easiest way to make a circle is to start with lines. So on top of this line, stamp and pull up about another 2 inches, or stamp and pull down. We're gonna cut that in half and stamp and connect. We're gonna make a circle. So we still have a little bit of neck. You can fill that in just because we don't want to see that plus sign in there. But don't worry again about that because we're going to cover it up. Now, for this step, make sure you've rinsed your brush. You want your brush to be nice and pointed. All right. And we're going to dip into this color. And let's stamp from each side of her, what are going to be her shoulders. And you can pull down and out. So stamp kind of hard and then release your pressure. And you're going to stop when you get maybe just a little bit past her waistline. So if you want her arms to match, what you can do is hold your brush up like this. Now I know where I should be. I can place a dot. I can measure how far away from her body the other areas are and place another dot. Oops. I'm a messy painter. I had some paint on my fingers, so you can always just kind of erase it if you move fast. Okay, it's okay to make mistakes. You can always fix it. So now let's do the same thing from here. Stamp kind of hard and release your pressure. Whoop. All right. It's okay if they're not perfectly even, but maybe take a step back and look at it. You're only going to be seeing about the bottom portion here. And I can hold my brush out. Okay. So let's just kind of fatten the arms a little bit where they connect to the body. Just going to press lightly. I want to leave it really sharp and pointy at the tips though. About halfway down, you could kind of add a little lump for her elbows. Boop, just adding like a little U shape. And then just above the hand, here, maybe like 1/4 of an inch above, stamp very lightly and pull a little line that goes towards the inside of the body. About a 1/2 inch from the tip of her hands. And you can kind of play with that. Now we got little arms in there. Now you could also, if you've watched any of my other videos, you could add a starfish in her hand or something like that if you want to cover it up. So don't worry if the hands aren't perfect. Maybe just add something on top or put hair over there later on. Okay, so now if you want to add a little bit of shadow, rinse out your round brush, dip into your brown, and on the inside of the arms, you can just tickle in a little bit of brown, the side of one side of her body. Doesn't matter what side. You could even do a little bit in both. Even at the bottom of her body, you could add a little bit of brown. Just to add a little bit of color in there. Maybe a little bit in the hands. Okay, perfect. Perfect. It should look a little silly right now. So if yours looks silly, you're probably at the right spot. Now, as frustrating as it is, we have to let her dry a little bit before we add on the colors, the fin, and of course the hair. So we're going to add some color on our coral while that dries and our seagrass shape. So let's take our painting, and for now we can flip it this way. In fact, I'll probably paint the rest of it this way, but just know if you get back to the mermaid and you're not feeling it, it feels weird, just know your canvas can move in any direction to suit your needs. Okay, so let's rinse out our round brush. Now, the colors, we're going to start with our lumpy coral here. So here's a few colors you can play with. You can play with yellow or red on its own. I like to mix orange and have it ready by using grabbing with my round brush 2 scoops of yellow, like a half a scoop of red. Red will take over really fast, so if that's not orange enough, just add tiny bits at a time till you get the color you want. Okay. You can also, if you have any pretty brighter purples or pinks, you could use that too. Any of your mermaid colors. I'm just going to stick with these today, but I love purple and pink in my paintings. So. Okay, so make sure your brush is fluffy, your round brush. Just like you painted your coral, you're going to paint over the top the same way. So you're already expert, so fluff out that round brush. And let's dip into whatever color you want to do first. I'm going to do red. We're going to just do several colors. And instead of tapping over the whole thing, I'm going to just tap into like the top of my coral. I could do a couple in red. I could do a couple in orange if I wanted. Ooh, more color the better. And just know it's going to dry a little darker, so if you get it on there and it feels really, really bright, don't worry too much about it, because you're not going to see it later. Now let's just go back to red. Why not? You could even get 2 of those colors on your brush. I kind of just did on accident. In fact, I kind of like that. Maybe I'll add more red. This is good to have a colorful painting. Okay, now let's go to our bottom coral. I'm going to pick yellow because it's in front. It's a little brighter. I like doing the background mostly in red, although I did add a little orange this time. Let me go back and add more red though. It's okay to not like something when you're done. You can always fix it, right? Okay, so we're going to tap some yellow in here, into our lower coral. Just add hints of color. Perfect. Now let's rinse out our brush. I like to do the branch coral in orange or purple or pink. So rinse your brush, make sure you've pinched and squeezed it, make sure it's got a nice point on there, and go ahead and dip into whatever color you choose. They could be all different colors. And we don't have to completely get rid of the black, but you're going to paint over the top. It's okay if little pieces of black are poking through. It'll just kind of look like you have a shadow. So remember, light to heavy pressure if you're going from the outside to the center, or press hard and go to the tips by stamping hard, pressing lightly. It's completely up to you. We just, however the pressure works best for you, just play with that. Whoop. Okay. Perfect. Let's do one more. Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to rinse out my brush. Squeeze it through my paper towel. I'm going to dip into green. And I'm going to go over my last element, which is the seagrass. So let's go ahead and just paint over the top. Might go a little outside the lines. It looks good still. We'll kind of give it almost like a watercolory look. It's okay to go a little bit off the lines. But if you go too far, just get a wet, clean paper towel, and you can dab off paint. As long as you move really fast, you can pretty much erase it right away. Just dab. Okay, there we are. We have our coral done. Mostly done. We're going to still add some bubbles. We'll add some little fishies in there. I'm going to add those last though. Let's go back to our mermaid, shall we? So take that round brush, rinse it out. We're going to start with the tail. So I like to paint the tail with kind of like a minty color, and then I'm going to streak some green in there. So to get that, what you're going to want is like 2 scoops of white. I'm using my round brush. And then a scoop of green. We do have that smaller round brush too. I'm going to leave that up to you guys whether or not you want to use it. Basically, if you're covering a larger area of paint, that brush is actually not very easy to use. It's good for little detail work, like if you're doing a flower in your hair. But if you're ever struggling with something, or maybe you don't have that great of a larger size or medium sized round brush, then you can use that baby brush, that small round brush in exchange. Okay, I've got a nice minty color. Make sure it's different than your background color. And let's start by just outlining her fin. Whoop. I'm gonna just outline it. I'm actually grabbing a little bit of dark green on there right now with my mint. And let's fill it in. Okay. Now you can take dark green on its own if your brush is dry. Maybe you want to rinse it out. Throw a couple streaks. Maybe if one side is a little more bootylicious, if you know what I mean, you could take some streaks of paint and add it to that side. And just kind of streak some color in there. And if that takes over too much, you can always dip back into your mint. Again, the key here is just making sure that your tail is a different color than your background so it doesn't blend in. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to add some more color in there too, but we're going to add the fin parts of this. So to do a proper mermaid fin, you're going to want to use that mint color, and you're going to place a dot at the tip of the tail. I'm going to show you guys again here on my handy dandy demo paper. Use your practice paper. What a fin should look like. So I'm going to show you in black so it's easier to see on the video, but you can use whatever color you want. So if I have the tip of the tail here, something like that, you're going to stamp and pull out. Stamp and pull out like a wide U shape. Then coming from the fin, go up just a little bit, maybe like a ½ inch or so, and you're going to connect to the tip of each side of the tail. So to do that, I'm going to make an S shape. I'm going to curve into a frowny face and into a smiley face. Frowny face into a smiley face. The tip of the tail could be sharp like that, or you could add a few little wispies at the end. You know, a million different ways to paint a mermaid tail. It's all about just playing with it. Okay. We're going to, if you've been practicing with the different colors, especially black, really rinse out that brush good. Spin it through your paper towel. Let's dip into our mint mixture that we made earlier. And we're going to stamp at the tip and curve out. Stamp and curve out. And then you can use your brush to make sure that these, the two parts of the fin are kind of in alignment. If they're really different, you can just play with your shape a little bit till the outside edge matches what you want. And the tip of the fin is going into the water a little bit. All right, now let's come up an inch or so from the tip of your tail. Frowny and a smiley. Frowny and a smiley. Perfect. We have a fin. Now we want to make that fin look, well, finny. So you can really take your paint, and when you fill it in, paint long brush strokes from the center to the tip. Center to tip. And you'll see a little bit more of what I mean in just a second. Let's get this in here. Center to tip, center to tip. Beautiful. Okay. So let's dip into green. And stamp long brush strokes, and you're going to just streak some green in there. Boop. Streak, streak, center to tip, just like you did with your mint color. Center tip, center tip. Ah, perfect. Again, we're going to add some orange in there too in just a minute. But while we have that mint and green, I like to add these little ruffles here at the tip of her tail because you're going to see part of the back on one side. So stamp kind of hard and pull like 2 to 3 lines that go towards her head on each side of the tail. And if you can't see those very well, you can add in more green on its own. Till it stands out. Little ruffles. I mean, you're only going to see one side of those. And I'm doing that same thing. Stamp, release, stamp, release. You can get as creative as you want. All right. We're going to add some orange in that tail, but let's just let that rest just a little bit. We're going to let that dry before we add in the hair and the rest of the colors in the tail. And let's talk about adding in some fish. Round brush, rinse it out. I like to use white and yellow, but you can use white and any other color. So this is double loading. So we're doing these little fish. Now, if you get really close to this painting, this looks really, really weird on its own. It just looks like little dots, but paintings are meant to be viewed from a distance. So if you don't trust me, get out of your chair, check it from a distance. So let's double load in white on one side of our round brush and yellow on the other side. And you're just going to do little stamps. So I'm going to stamp in, stamp, 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 like these little clusters. These are great for covering up. If you don't like part of your light shining through, you can cover it up. If you don't like part of your coral, you can cover it up. I would do no more than like 3 groups of these. So you can make these look 3D by making kind of some come across an image and then underneath it, so they're like weaving in and out of your coral. I could come from behind my coral like this. And I'm just stamping my brush, that's it. Stamp, stamp. And maybe I'll do one more curving from a different direction, like over here. Doop, boop, boop. Just little fishy friends swimming along. Perfect. Okay. Isn't that so easy? I love it too. It just adds some sparkle. All right. Let's talk about bubbles a little bit. So you can use your round brush. Make sure it's nice and pointy. This is not in the example, but let's show you how to do them because they can be kind of fun too. Now, I like to use white on one side of my brush and a little bit of teal. If you're done with your teal, you can either mix more by using white, green, and blue, or you could just use white on your brush with blue on the other side. But either way, it's nice to add white with a little bit of blue so it'll kind of see through. All right, so these don't have to be perfect shapes. You could do a couple bubbling up from your coral. Let me warn you, this step is really fun, so don't overdo it. So I'm going to stamp and spin a few little circles here. Stamp and spin. And again, they don't have to be perfect circles because they're bubbles. They're going to be changing the shape. Stamp and spin, stamp and spin. And the upper right corner, you can just add a little accent, like an apostrophe. So little circle and apostrophe. I know now that I'm looking, it's really hard to see. So let's show you on the paper again so you can see. That's all I'm doing. Circle and apostrophe. Yeah? Okay. You got it. If you hate one of your bubbles, just paint over it with teal. All right. So let's add, if you do one, you want to do at least a couple. So maybe I'll do a couple more bubbles over here. Make them different sizes, different amount of bubbles. And why not? Maybe I'll add some up here. Just because we can. Bubble, 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 bubble. Bubble. All right, perfect. I'm going to rinse out my round brush. And we are going to go ahead and finish our tail. So make sure your brush is rinsed. If you have orange left, go ahead and use that from your coral. But if you're out, mix a scoop of yellow with a little dip of red. So I'm going to dip into orange. And I'm going to place a few dots on the lighter side of her tail. So whatever side was the more bootylicious side, let's go ahead and the lighter side, let's just do some dots. So I'm just kind of stamping again. I'm adding almost freckles to one side of her tail. You could even come here kind of to the tip of her tail and add some on the opposite side. And then I'm going to take some of that orange and add some long streaks from the center to the tip. Again, I'm going to try to work on the inside of the dark green. Stamp, stamp, flick, stamp, flick, stamp, flick, stamp, flick. Okay. You could add some in the little booty ruffles here if you want to. Oops. I'm such a messy painter. People make fun of me for it all the time. So, see, I made a mistake. That's a good opportunity to show you guys. I took a wet paper towel and I just wiped it away. So easy, as long as you move fast. It's fun to make mistakes. That's how we learn. Okay. We are pretty much done with our tail. Maybe look at it. If it's not standing out well, you could add even streaks of blue. You could come in here and kind of add a more dramatic outline to the sides of her tail using your dark green, your only green, if you wanted. Perfect. Just make a lot of whoop whoop sounds. Seems to help the painting process to make sound effects. I'm not sure why. At least for me. All right, so we're going to paint our hair. Now, I find when I teach mermaids, people really like to have the hair be their same hair color. So here are the rules. If you want white or black hair, you can use those colors on your own. If you would like red or blonde or any other color I've missed, purple, pink, blue, whatever hair, you want to start with white. Let the white dry and then paint over the top with your color of choice. That's because every other color is not going to stand out. Now, also, when you're thinking of hair color, maybe be careful. Think about what color your background is. You don't want your color of the hair to match the background. I'm going to use black because it's easy. Because I just have to do one color. But again, you can use whatever color you want. All right, so basically, we're going to have this hair filled in along the head, the neck, and the shoulder area. And then we're going to have kind of these loose ends on the bottom. So start with whatever side you want. I'm going to kind of have the hair come this way and cut across this way so I can see some of those freckles in there, the orange freckles I just painted. So let's stamp at the top of the head, kind of wiggle, cover up the shoulders. When you get about like an inch away from the bottom of the back, start cutting off one direction. And I'm kind of going to release my pressure at the end, whoop, like a flick, so the tip of the hair is nice and pointed. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side. Outline, cut across the shoulders because they're going to look kind of weird. Wiggle, 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 and flick. Now we can basically fill in the whole thing. If you're doing a different color, you could also, after you have it filled in with the color of your choice, after white, you could add streaks of color in her hair. You could do the same thing with black. You just want to start with white. And then, so paint the hair in black, add streaks of white, and then add your color on top later. Lots of options. Just play with it. Okay, so I filled in basically her hair, like the top half. But when I get to the bottom, I want to leave some loose ends. So I'm just going to kind of stamp and flick, and then I'm going to add a few random loose pieces of hair wherever else I like. I'm painting it upside down. It might be easier to do this step right side up. For me, it's not, I don't know, too much different. So you guys just decide. Just know you don't have to do it the exact way I'm doing it. You're going to find your own preferred way of doing things. Now, sometimes when I paint the step, her head ends up looking a little shrugged. Sometimes the neck gets too skinny, so you can always add some more, volume to the top of her head to make her neck look a little bit longer. All right, that's beautiful. We got hair. We've got hair. Yes. So let's go back to the tail. These next two parts are optional. Honestly, this painting could be done at this point. But I'm going to move back to let's move back to our big brush. You could do it with your round brush though. But if you still have your big brush handy, I know I said we were done with it, but you could use that brush. And we're going to do what we did before. You're going to dip into a little bit of white. In fact, let's dip into white, scrape it off our brush, flip our brush over, dip it into blue. And now just at the very tip of the tail, a little bit more white. I'm going to add some more squiggles and taps. I still want to see a little bit of that tail poking through, so it's okay if there's a lot of water on your brush. But now it'll look like the top of her fin is peeking out above the water. Really fun. Okay, wonderful. So if your hair is still wet, maybe take a break for a minute, let it dry, or you could touch up your coral. Actually, let's show you this, because my hair is still a little bit wet. So I'm going to take my smaller, tiny round brush. I'm going to rinse out the tip, and I'm going to use actually the stick end. And I'm going to dip into any color of choice. It needs to be different than the background of the coral. And if I take the stick end and I just add some little dots of various pressure, it'll add a little bit of twinkle into my background. So, it's probably a little hard to see. But I'm just doing little tiny dots, and I don't want to overdo this step, but it'll add like just a little bit of twinkle in there. Doop, doop, doop. That's great if you're painting stars or something like that too. All right, so now that I have my baby brush, I'm going to make sure the tip is nice and pointed by using my fingers. It's nice and damp. I'm going to add a flower in her hair. Let's show you with this. This is how we paint it. I'm going to start with white and then add whatever color I want on top. Do a dot. So that dot's probably going to be, somewhere like right there. Either side of her hair. Dot. From that dot, pull a capital Y. So I start with my V, stamp on that middle dot, I'm going to pull down. Now we have these two larger side angles of the Y. Let's stamp in the middle and pull out and cut those in half. And we have a perfect starfish. I love making starfish. Practice on your paper a couple of times though. It might take a minute to get that shape, and then it'll be easy once you got it. Just might want to practice. Okay, my brush is nice and pointed. I am dipping into white. I'm going to pick whatever side of her hair. I want to add a flower. Let's do right here today. I'm going to stamp and pull my Y. So stamp up, make a V, stamp down, make a Y. Stamp on these two larger sides right here and here, cut them in half. Yay, awesome. You have a starfish. Oops, if one line gets a little long like it did for me, just make them all a little bit longer. Now, it could be white like that, or you could add your orange, yellow, pink, purple, whatever colors you are feeling on top. Okay, and then you can flip your brush again to the opposite side, dip into whatever color you like, place a little dot. Boop, to give it a center. Well, mermaids and mermen, believe it or not, you have completed Splash! Congratulations on your new masterpiece. You should be proud of what you painted today, so don't forget to sign it. The traditional spot is the sign in the bottom right-hand corner, usually with your name and the year. You can sign with your round brush, your small round brush, or with Sharpies if you like. I like to use black or silver if the bottom right-hand corner has a lot of black paint. Just make sure that paint is dry if you're going to use a Sharpie. So thank you so much for painting with me today. If you enjoyed today's video and you could leave a tip to fund future virtual art parties and tutorials, you can do so by leaving a donation on my Venmo page or my PayPal, which is also listed in the video description. Also, if you live on Maui and would like to purchase or rent supplies for our future virtual art parties, you can visit our online store at www.islandartparty.com, and please show us your art. We would love to see your finished masterpieces. You can email us your completed masterpieces to info@islandartparty.com, or you can message me on my Facebook page, Art by Sheep. Thank you so much once again for joining me today. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel using the link below. Thank you, and I'll see you next time, and don't forget to keep on creating.